Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar series. My name is Chloe Tetro, the health coach here with Ready Care. Apologies for last week. There seemed to have been some technical difficulties where the whole thing went off and I was still chatting away. So apologies to anyone who missed the end of my talk. If you're interested in getting the end of the information, please don't hesitate to reach out. For today's session, it's a brief session. It's basically just going to be speaking about why eat less, move more. That old chestnut that's around misses the mark hugely in an awful lot of cases, and why it's a case of putting the cart before the horse sometimes, and just really kind of misframing metabolic health, weight loss, calories in, calories out. So for today's session, I'll just do a really quick little introduction as to what is happening at a metabolic level and why is it that I say eat less, move more is not really the answer. Now, caveat right off the bat, am I saying to people not to exercise? I'm not saying that at all. Am I saying, don't exercise and, eat your way through Tesco's Christmas aisle? I'm not. So right off the bat, I that isn't the angle here. But more importantly, I suppose I speak to an awful lot of people that may have had this particular sentence drilled into their heads as to why they were finding it difficult to lose weight, as the kind of cure-all sentence is, oh, well, if you stepped away from the plate, put the fork down, eat less, move more, this type of absolutely terrible way of, first of all, speaking to any person with any shred of dignity, but just why that's really inaccurate and problematic to cling on to as advice when we're looking at metabolic health. Now, I'm framing this through the lens of weight associated with polycystic ovarian syndrome, pre-diabetes, type 2, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the quote-unquote middle-age spread, and menopause and post-menopause weight gain, because all of these will be tied into the hormonal facets that I'll speak about today. So I'm not highlighting weight as a kind of first case, end case, goal, this, that, and the other. I'm talking about individuals that are struggling across the board with a few different things and noticing that their weight is becoming out of their control. I'm not trying to say that people need to absolutely be, prioritizing losing weight or anything like that. That's not what I'm about. That's not what Ready Cares about. If you're happy and feeling control in your body, whatever your body looks like, if you're happy and healthy, there's absolutely no difficulty with that. This is geared towards individuals that feel like they are losing control of their own bodies and looking for an explanation as to what they can do to feel back in the driver's seat with it. So the main kind of problem with the calories in, calories out model is that, yes, weight change does technically depend on energy balance. So that's what I mean by in, out. Excuse me. But the idea that all calories are equal really ignores how food affects our bodies differently. So one of the things I know Andrew talks about a lot, the example he gives a lot, is there's a huge difference in how your body processes 300 calories of cream egg versus 300 calories of steak, right? So there's your digestion, there's blood sugar impact, and there's basically what are the knock-on effects of specific foods. They could have the same calories reported, but how they impact your body is extremely different. So the other thing to keep in mind, right, is if you're somebody that checks calories on packets, calorie label accuracy is not amazing. It's a guesstimation at the best of times. So just something to bear in mind. The body will compensate for calorie restriction by then slowing your metabolism. So if you're drastically reducing your calories, your body needs to conserve energy because calories equals energy. So if you're very, very in an energy deficit, your body more than likely will start to compensate, as it would, by saying, look, we've got a finite amount of energy here, we need to look after it. So that's why weight loss plateaus are very, very common. There's studies that show that resting metabolic rate, so that is basically how much energy your body uses, how much calories your body burns, etc., at rest. That can drop by about 10 to 15% when somebody's restricting calories for an extended period of time. So metabolic health in the UK and in Ireland. Next slide. Now, why I'm focusing on metabolic health isn't just to get the bingo sheet out of me saying specific things, but it's really when I said getting the cart before the horse of eat less, move more. That advice can make sense in a theoretical way on paper, right? If you want to have more calories burnt in your body, and if you don't want them stored, you need to burn them by pounding the pavement and you need to restrict the amount going into your body, right? That's the out there advice. That's the eat less, move more. Now, why doesn't this work? Right? What's the problem with this? The problem is that if your metabolism isn't running the way it's supposed to, if it's not doing the things that it should, it's not going to function so easily. So in the UK, there's 64% of adults are overweight or obese, which would be classed as a metabolic dysfunction, right? Problem with your metabolism. And about 9% will live with diabetes. And in Ireland, it's 60% are overweight, with 6% officially diagnosed with diabetes. And that's a really, really important point because an awful lot of people fly under the radar where diabetes and pre-diabetes is concerned. They might say, yes, I've noticed my weight creeping up. I've noticed being a bit more tired. I've noticed going to the loo more at night. And a bit of inflammation in my gut, but they've just never gone to get tested. So roughly, if we're just taking the 60% of overweight or obese, that will be classed as a metabolic dysfunction. And the statistics really underscore that it is an increasing problem. Now, why does this matter? Because if we have advice like eat less, move more, that doesn't take into consideration the way somebody's body mechanistically breaks down foods, it is just bad advice, right? So when somebody's got metabolic dysfunction, they usually have a problem with the hormone insulin that would usually, its main job is to help glucose get into the cells, right? So everybody has it, not just people with diabetes. We all produce insulin. It all has a job within the body. But when there's metabolic dysfunction, like there is in the 60% individuals that are classified as obese, overweight, more often than not, there is metabolic dysfunction in there. And what happens then with the insulin is that your body needs to pump more and more and more and more of it into your system to get it to do its job. Now, the problem with a surplus of your insulin is that it pushes the body to store fat rather than burn fat. Okay, I'll say that again. So if you have too much insulin in your system, your body is getting a message to store fat rather than burn it. So people with insulin resistance will often struggle to lose weight even if they have calorie restriction, because their metabolism is already struggling, it's already compromised. So if the body's getting this signal via the surplus of insulin to store weight, store weight, store weight, store weight, don't lose it, don't burn it, store, 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 store. You could be eating like a dove, right? You could be eating like a pigeon. You could have scraps. And oftentimes I speak to, it's more often than not women, but sometimes it's men, individuals that have struggled with their weight and they have eaten very, very, very restricted amounts of food and they will still struggle. More often than not, the types of food that they're eating when they're restricting will be grains, fruit, rice, potatoes, porridge, pasta, rice cakes. And the problem with all of the high carbohydrate foods is they actually bring up your insulin signal. So if you are calorie restricting to beat the band, struggling hugely with your weight, and then you're eating foods, very small amounts of foods, but the types of foods that you're eating are things like the rice, potatoes, pastas, porridge, whole grains, fruit like bananas, apples, pears, grapes. All of these foods, even though they're classified as quote unquote health foods, even though they're in the food pyramid, etc., 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 if you're somebody struggling with metabolic dysfunction, all of these foods will promote high insulin, fat storage. Okay? So the reason I'm laying it out as on the nose as I am is that I speak to an awful lot of people that are having desperate experiences with diets, desperate experiences with low self-esteem, body rejection, etc., because there's very little understanding of this process in mainstream advice. So calorie restriction and doing, an hour on the treadmill while eating like a bird, but eating the types of food that spike your blood insulin levels are not the way. You're going to end up absolutely a shell of a human from just the experience of it alone. Now, there's another 3 hormones I'll touch on here briefly: leptin, ghrelin, and cortisol, or friend cortisol. Now, so leptin is produced by fat cells and signals fullness. When there's a surplus of insulin, leptin resistance will develop. And that basically means that the signal from leptin, which tells your body that you're full, isn't heard, for want of a better word, as adequately as it used to be. And with ghrelin, that's the hunger hormone. Again, in a surplus insulin environment, both of these hormones can't communicate effectively. So there's a tendency to have difficulty intuiting when your body is full and when it's genuinely hungry, because the signals are all over the place. Now, the other one that could be a talk in and of itself, and it is cortisol, which is released during stress, and this raises your blood sugar and insulin levels. So when you've got high cortisol levels, people talk about cortisol belly, that kind of apple shape that happens. It gets in the way of weight loss, obviously, but the reason for that being is chronic stress releases chronic amounts of cortisol. Cortisol is fine in small amounts. In large amounts, it's going to basically replicate that process of high blood sugars. So you're more likely to store, less likely to burn adequately. So the movement aspect of things, and again, the caveat here is I am not telling people not to move. I'm just saying don't browbeat yourself into continuous movement, being exhausted and saying, why am I not seeing results? So it is critical for overall health, right? Mitochondria, those little powerhouse of the cells. Exercise is brilliant for looking after your cardiovascular health. It's brilliant for getting your mitochondria there. Now, if you're relying solely on exercise to lose weight, it can be quite ineffective for a number of people. So exercise only accounts for a portion of your daily energy expenditure, and what's called compensatory behaviors, which basically means it'll offset your burnt calories. So what you're more likely to get is you've burned calories, right, more than you had to burn, and you're going to get absolutely starving, or you're going to crash out for the rest of the day. So those compensatory behaviors are either going to bring your calories back up, or they're going to store the energy for what's there. So excessive exercise routines, which I've seen a lot in particularly younger women and men who may have been overweight and have been told, eat less, exercise more. So excessive routines, especially when they're paired with severe calorie restriction, can also elevate that stress hormone cortisol, which will not only disrupt sleep, make you feel miserable. If you're a woman, it can reduce your fertility. But more to the point, it's not going to allow you to reach the target that you're looking to reach. So remember, if your cortisol is elevated, if that stress hormone is elevated for a long period of time, it's going to replicate high insulin, high blood sugar in your body, because the body is going to feel that it's stressed, and when the body is stressed, it releases sugar. So your high stress levels, the physical stress you're putting on the body, the physical strain you're putting on the body, is actually stopping you from losing weight. So low carb diets, right, as opposed to low calorie and low fat diets, have been shown time and time and time and time and time again to vastly outperform low fat diet and calorie restriction diets. Now, the difference being, with a low carbohydrate, you're getting down that sugar signal, you're getting down that insulin signal, so the body no longer has to store fat, and it can utilize stored fats much easier. The other huge point about this, why the low carbohydrate are far superior to the other ones, is that you're not going to be hungry all the time, right? And for anyone who's ever done a diet, they can tell you when they're hungry all the time, all they think about is food. And if all you think about is food all day long, how likely are you to be able to, first of all, function like an actual human being that needs energy to function, for brain function, for emotional regulation, for, planning, for any action, really, concentration? We need calories. Calories aren't the enemy here. It's the hormonal problems that the wrong type of calories cause that are the enemy. So there's a 2024 meta-analysis, if anybody is looking to look more into this 2024 meta-analysis on low carb versus low fat, that shows that not only do participants get the desired results, they lost 2.8 kg more on average than the other types of diet, they're also able to sustain it. They don't feel hunger, because remember, you don't have to calorie restrict. You don't have to be counting calories all day long. You just eat the types of food that don't upset the metabolism of the body. So it helps with hormonal regulation. It will help with females with hormonal disruption. It will help to reduce your triglycerides and raise your HDL cholesterol, which is your good cholesterol. It's going to help with anything from low moods, anxiety. There are proven studies on this, that across the board, they're a much, much better option for those trying to lose weight. Now, I'm looking at this from a sustainability factor, and I say this with somebody that was never practiced in the art of motivation and sticking to anything particularly well. I've been on a version of this for 8 years. This also allows for dip in, dip out moments. You don't have to be on 800 blinking calories a day, which is insane for an adult to do long term. If you have anything that demands physical or strong, processing power, it is not sustainable to do crash diets, as we all know. The other thing is, if you associate being quote unquote healthy by undertaking one of those low calorie, low fat crash diets, right? If you think, okay, like that's me looking after my health, you're going to start associating feeling miserable and hungry and cranky and tired with being healthy, which isn't a good programming to set yourself up with. So long story short, big takeaway here is essentially eat less, move more is only half the picture, right? And it's a very, very flawed reductionist version of the picture that doesn't account for over 60% of the population having difficulty with their metabolism. If you're Lord Haha, as we say here, if you're Lord Haha and there's absolutely nothing wrong with your blood works, your hormones, your organs, you are just the peak athlete going out there, the advice could be okay for you. But for most ordinary people that aren't Olympian trained athletes, that are in the best shape of their life, most people, the metabolism is where you start. And from there, once your hormones are in check, once your stress levels are in check, once your hunger and satiation hormones are functioning the way that they should, that's a much better place to start from. And any diet, any changes in your food that will promote you feeling good, full, not anxious, not OCD checking calories constantly, that's a much, much calmer, much more sustainable way of looking at things. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. Again, I'm not saying not to exercise. I'm not saying to go off and eat the house out. I'm just saying that if you're finding that the advice eat less, move more is insulting and hasn't worked, this might be another method to try. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. Have a lovely rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again. Bye now.